up, children? It's your Uncle Matt here with the very first episode of what I think is going to be like world historic, kind of YouTube channel. And we've got quite the opening salvo for you today. I don't know if you heard the news. We got a new governor. Bad news is it's the same governor. Our boy, Ron D. Butterfly, Florida's favorite doughboy himself, got himself re-inaugurated to the governorship of Florida up there in Tallahassee a couple days ago. He gave a whole speech and everything. He's a twice gubernatorial motherfucker, looking like quite a force to be reckoned and or contended with, if you be so inclined. And he was spitting some truth out. Well, not necessarily truth, but spitting some stuff about the woke agenda and the woke practitioners. He's not a fan. He doesn't care for them. Would like to see them kindly take a hike back to where they came from, be that Berkeley, California, or Berkeley School of Music. We don't need your type here because we got to make way for more rich folks. They're going to be moving in. So we don't want to see you or your woke agenda proposed or performed, and we're looking at you specifically, drag queens, of course. But he did have some kind words for himself, which was nice. And you know what? Why don't we just take a look?
Mr. Chief Justice, members of the cabinet, and fellow citizens, from the Space Coast to the Sun Coast, from St. John's to St. Lucie, streets of Hialeah to the Speedway in Daytona, Okeechobee, all the way up to Micanopy.
It goes on like this.
Freedom lives here in our great sunshine state of Florida.
Okay, so here we immediately get to the basically germ of why I wanted to do this project to begin with, which is this DeSantisian idea of freedom that's going to be repeated over and over again throughout this oration, the entire duration of the oration, as it were. It's not just a sort of like rote recitation of thanks for a vague spell cast by the forefathers of this country that we're used to hearing from the Republican Party for the past 30 or so years at least. It means something very specific, and we're going to want to get into what this freedom means through the prism of DeSantis's beady little eyes, this motherfucker. Freedom for what? Freedom from what? Freedom to what? And most importantly, freedom for whom? We'll find ultimately that this idea of freedom is part of a much larger project. Sort of the epicenter of this movement is Florida, and it's getting revved up here and ready to be unleashed on the unsuspecting country at large. So I think it's important to really sort of track these ideas of where better to start than right here. Major props to the big boy for not caving to the wokes and putting the sign language lady where anybody could see her.
It lives in the courage of those who patrol the streets and who keep our communities safe. It lives in the industry of those who work long hours to earn a living and raise their families.
Yeah.
It lives in the dedication of those who teach our children.
As long as they're not genderqueer.
It lives in the determination of those who grow our food.
As long as they're not illegal.
It lives in the wisdom of our senior citizens.
Yep, we got a lot of those.
It lives in the dreams of the historic number of families who have moved from states across this country because they saw Florida as the land of liberty and the land of sanity.
Liberty, also known as freedom's dipshit stepbrother. And he's right. We do have a fuckload of folks. A folkload of forks. Folkload of forks. A forkload of folks. A fuckload of folks and forks. We got a bunch of people moving down here in pursuit of some ideological sort of freedom, okay? Traditionally, that has been the lack of an income tax here in the state. But now it starts to take on something new. It has in the past couple of years, as DeSantis has positioned himself as some sort of bastion of freedom from medical tyranny. Basically, liberty from vaccines.
Over the past few years, as so many states in our country grinded their citizens down, we in Florida lifted our people up.
Oh boy, here we go.
When other states consigned their people's freedom to the dustbin, Florida stood strongly as freedom's linchpin. When the world lost its mind, when common sense suddenly became an uncommon virtue.
This is all COVID denial, virtue signaling. That's what this is. That's what is happening now.
Florida was a refuge of sanity, a citadel of freedom for our fellow Americans and even for people around the world.
That was a big long sentence with a lot of clauses, a lot of gerunds, a lot of flaming participles, a lot of what have yous. I feel like it needs some closer inspection. Perhaps it needs to be diagrammed. But what I think I'd like to do is see if I can take out bits and pieces of that sentence that might be extraneous and see if we can't falsify this statement in some way, huh?
Florida was a refuge for people around the world.
Boo, no, wrong. Remember these guys? You didn't give them refuge in Florida. You had them picked up in Texas and trafficked to fucking Martha's Vineyard, okay? When he talks about liberty, ask yourself liberty for whom? That's 1 for me, 0 for the big boy. So it's not looking good in his first term already.
In captaining the ship of state, we choose to navigate the boisterous sea of liberty rather than cower in the calm docks of despotism.
This sounds like it might have been written in crayon.
We face attacks. We take hits, but we weather the storms. We stand our ground.
Just a casual shout out to the legal doctrine that allowed George Zimmerman to get away with murdering Trayvon Martin. Cool stuff.
And we do what's right. As the book of Psalms reminds us, I will not fear though tens of thousands assail me on every side.
No one is assailing you, dude. No one. Like, I know you have you do have a bunch of sides. You have a bunch of sides. I mean that both in the spatial geometric sense. I am making fun of your body, but I'm also talking about, I know you have a soft side. I know you've got a hard side. You know, you've got sort of a limp side, and I know you've definitely got a poetic side. But no one is assailing any of those sides, though. That's the point. That's what I wanted to say.
We have refused to use polls and to put our finger in the wind. Leaders do not follow, they lead.
I feel like that's kind of a weird anti-democratic thing to say. We don't follow polls. Sure, we don't want a wishy-washy waffle flip-flopper, right? We hate those. But generally we want an executive branch that's somewhat respondent to the needs and the attitudes of its constituents, I feel like that's not too much to ask. The idea that a leader doesn't follow, a leader leads is definitionally true. So I mean, so he's got you there, but weird to put that in a speech like this. Weird to say, I'm the guy in charge, okay? I don't care what you think, all right? You elected me because generically I'm kind of, represent your attitude about things. You're generally kind of can express your fears through me and then sort of impose them upon society in the most disgusting way possible from your retirement home. If I decide that I'm gonna, kind of pivot, move in a different direction, y'all fucked. Fuck you.
We have articulated a vision for a free and prosperous state. We have, through persistence and hard work, executed on that vision. We have produced favorable results. And now we are here today because the people of Florida have validated our efforts in record fashion.
Yeah, but if we're really honest with ourselves, I think we'll admit that we're here because Florida's become such a right-wing cesspit that the Democrats have started running Republicans against Republicans.
Florida shows that results matter. We lead not by mere words, but by deeds. 4 years ago, we promised to pursue a bold agenda. We did just that, and we have produced results.
I know I've been kind of grumpy this whole time, but I have a feeling that these results are going to be fucking fire.
We said we would ensure that Florida taxed lightly, regulated reasonably, and spent conservatively, and we delivered.
No taxes, regulation. All right, we kind of already are. I mean, it's been our thing.
We promised we would enact big education reforms, and we delivered.
DeSantis' higher education reform bill contained provisions asking universities to keep track of students' political affiliations. It also resulted in a bunch of his right-wing lunatic buddies being installed in positions of power throughout the state's university system. Most notably, Ben Sass from Nebraska, who was installed as president of the University of Florida in Gainesville and was run out of town by the fucking students. Good for you guys. Way to go. We love you. The so-called Don't Say Gay bill has basically made it possible for schools to fire teachers for being gay if a student finds out about it. They always find out about it, dude. These are not W's.
We said we would end judicial activism by appointing jurists who understand the proper role of a judge is to apply the law as written, not legislate from the bench, and we delivered.
I don't know what he's talking about here. Judicial activism is the perennial hobby horse of the right wing. They are always concerned about judges that don't rule in their favor or in ways that sets precedent that they like. They consider it to be legislating from the bench. What this does remind me of is the case of Andrew Warren, who was a state prosecutor from Hillsborough County by Tampa, who was suspended by DeSantis for vowing not to prosecute anyone that might run afoul of an anti-abortion law that might be enacted. So that seems to be what this is referring to. That's how this dog whistle sounds to me.
We promised to usher in a new era of stewardship for Florida's natural resources by promoting water quality and Everglades restoration efforts, and we delivered.
When you're right, you're right. Homeboy has done pretty good for red tide here in the state of Florida, which is a pretty nasty amoebal infestation of our waters down in South Florida, creeping into the Tampa area. He has been funding and fighting it pretty well for the past few years. So congrats to him. Congrats to him for being a stop clock, at least, at most.
We said we would stand for law and order and support the men and women of law enforcement, and we delivered.
Oh boy, did they like the sound of that. That is some good smelling red meat to their ears. A lot of red meat in this sauce, and they are loving the way that it sizzles. The cops keep getting their money. And now, if you get run over because you're protesting in the middle of the street and someone angry hits you with their Volkswagen, they don't have to investigate it as a murder, so that saves them a lot of paperwork, and they're fine with that.
We promised to remedy deficiencies in Florida's election administration and to hold wayward officials accountable, and we delivered.
This is just more sleight of hand. There are no wayward elections officials in Florida. There are no election results that are in question in Florida. There are no gangs of heavily armed elderly people roaming the streets threatening to string up the local bean counter because the nice weather lady didn't win the election. That's not happening here. Trump won in 2016 handily, and he won again in 2020 by an even greater margin. So even the most insane election deniers have no beef with Florida. That's all the states that they sued. Florida isn't one of them. The election security that he's talking about is the restriction of the franchise from minorities and the poor. The only wayward people he's targeting are ex-cons who were guaranteed their right to vote back by a constitutional amendment that was passed in 2020. He had about 50 of these people arrested recently, most of them black, after they had been guaranteed their right to vote back by local officials, only to then be targeted by state law enforcement for, guess what, voter fraud. Most of these cases are being dropped, if not all of them, but it doesn't matter because it served its purpose. It gave the big boy a nice big headline, a nice big shot on the head of the Jacksonville Star Ledger Tribune Picayune. Right there on the front page, above the fold, sending a bunch of black people to jail. So that's how you clean up your elections.
We said we would support the areas in Northwest Florida stricken by Hurricane Michael, and we delivered. And when Hurricane Ian came last year, the state coordinated a massive mobilization of response personnel, facilitated the fastest power restoration on record, and even quickly rebuilt key bridges that had been wiped out by the storm.
Okay. Not bad, you roly-poly son of a bitch. You may have done a little bit of good there. Yeah. No, actually, he was pretty great with the recent hurricanes. No problems there. Shit got where it needed to get. You would hope so. The amount of hurricanes that we get on a regular and historic basis and ever increasing basis as shit continues to get more fucked. If we're gonna give each other kudos, if we're gonna scratch each other's backs, if we're gonna say gesundheit to each other's sneezes, we got to be real with each other. We got to recognize when somebody else does a good job at the same thing. And Ron had to buck up and stand next to Joe Biden, looking like the saddest little boy in the whole wide kingdom, the littlest man on the tiniest of planets, just so sad, just sitting there wearing his Burger King cap, fucking crying into a plum pudding because he had to stand next to Joe Biden, who was there wearing his aviators, eating ice cream. It was exactly like the meme on TV that you see. Yeah, we had our boy Ron standing next to Biden, beaming because he had his favorite vanilla ice. We had his favorite flavor at the disaster zone, which was a feat of modern engineering that DeSantis was able to pull off. But he still was not able to pull off a smile because he was so sad that he had to be photographed next to Biden, giving the man props for not actively interfering with the federal government, letting it do its job, basically.
We have stood by the people of Southwest Florida, and we will continue to do so in the weeks, months, and years ahead.
It should be noted that our big ol' Chef Boyardee signed a bill into law that almost makes it impossible for homeowners to sue their insurance company when their insurance company denies a claim from a hurricane or something like that. Also, flood insurance in a state that is rapidly being subsumed by the Atlantic Ocean is almost unheard of.
Because of these efforts and others, Florida is leading the nation. We are #1 in these United States in net in-migration.
Rich people moving in from out of state to not pay taxes. Yes, go on.
We are the nation's fastest growing state. We are #1 in new business formations.
How we doing on wages, though? Oh, not good? Fuck.
We are #1 in tourism. We are #1 in economic freedom. We rank #1 in education freedom.
Okay, now we're getting into superlatives that can't really be measured. Where are you going with this, Ronaldo?
And we rank #1 in parental involvement in education.
Oh, right. We're one of those states that very much encourages its people to harass school boards about masks and pronoun usage. Right, of course. How could it be so foolish?
Florida also ranks #1 in public higher education. This is a record we can all be proud of. But we're far from done. Florida's accumulated a record budget surplus, and we need to
invested in the state's deteriorating infrastructure?
We need to enact record tax relief.
Oh, fuck. Okay.
Particularly for Florida families who are grappling with inflation.
Okay, fine. But, maybe we could do something about the wages?
We must ensure school systems are responsive to parents and to students, not partisan interest groups.
Okay, here it comes.
And we must ensure that our institutions of higher learning are focused on academic excellence and the pursuit of truth, not the imposition of trendy ideologies.
Yeah, those trendy ideologies extending personhood to people that, quite frankly, we'd rather not send our kids to school with. It's a bit scary. We've got to hew more towards the more traditional ideologies. Perhaps a more conservative ideology or a more, perhaps even a more reactionary ideology.
Florida must always be a great place to raise a family. We will enact more family-friendly policies to make it easier to raise children, and we will defend our children against those who seek to rob them of their innocence.
Drag queens. Just drag queens. He's just talking about drag queens. This is the longest applause break of the entire thing. I've edited out most of the applause just for rhythm's sake, and I edited out most of this applause here, but it goes on for fucking ever. These people love this shit. They're that animated about drag queens. That's what this is about. Drag queens. That's what drives these people crazy. That's what grinds these people's gears. That's what gets these people slapping their meat hooks together like a bunch of fucking seals.
We will always remain a law and order state. We will always support law enforcement, and we will always reject soft on crime policies that put our communities at risk.
Like letting just anybody vote. Can't do that.
Florida is now in a golden era for conservation of our treasured natural resources. Our momentum is strong, and we will finish what we started. We will leave Florida to God better than we found it.
Okay, to me, that sounds like he anticipates governing Florida during the rapture. That's what that sounds like to me. Am I crazy? Am I crazy? I'm not crazy. That's what that sounds like, right?
This much we pledge and so much more. Now, it's often said that our federalist constitutional system, with 50 states able to pursue their own unique policies, represents a laboratory of democracy. Well, these last few years have witnessed a great test of governing philosophies, as many jurisdictions pursued a much different path than we have pursued here in the state of Florida.
What the fuck is he? Okay, I think what he's saying is that here in America, we've got a bunch of states, all right? And all these different states are free to do a bunch of different state stuff. So you got Oregon over here, it's doing Oregon stuff. You got Idaho, kind of, next door doing Idaho stuff. There's Oklahoma, that's right in the middle, and that's going to be doing Oklahoma stuff. And you got Maryland, you got Maine, and they'll be doing Maryland and Maine stuff respectively. But then the whole time, throughout this time period, which it's been a certain amount of time, Florida has been doing Florida stuff. And that's great stuff. And that is what makes this the greatest political system on the planet. I think that's a fair interpretation of what he just said.
The policies pursued by these states have sparked a mass exodus of productive Americans from these jurisdictions, with Florida serving as the most desired destination, a promised land of sanity.
Yo, Florida is the dude that she told you not to worry about. Am I right?
Many of these cities and states have embraced faddish ideology at the expense of enduring principles.
I love the idea that there are faddish ideologies on the one hand and enduring principles on the other. Like if you were a shithead who owned a lunch counter in the 60s and a black guy wanted to come up and sit there and you said, get the fuck out of here. You get your woke ideology that you are a human being that can fully engage in civic life and sit here in this place with the rest of us human beings. Get that faddish ideology out of here, because I'm standing on my enduring principles that I am somehow a member of a superior race, even though my teeth are falling out and I've got gout and my wife just left me.
They've harmed public safety by coddling criminals and attacking law enforcement. They've imposed unreasonable burdens on taxpayers to finance unfathomable levels of public spending. They have harmed education by subordinating the interests of students and parents to partisan interest groups. They have imposed medical authoritarianism in the guise of pandemic mandates and restrictions that lack a scientific basis.
Wait, okay, who are we talking about though? Is this like back to the Oregon and Idaho and Maryland thing?
This bizarre but prevalent ideology that permeates these policy measures purports to act in the name of justice for the marginalized, but it frowns upon American institutions. It rejects merit and achievement, and it advocates identity essentialism.
Wait, how did we get here? Who are we talking about and what the fuck is going on?
We reject this woke ideology.
Oh no, it's the wokes. Oh fuck. I should have known that the wokes would show up and ruin everything at some point.
We seek normalcy, not philosophical lunacy. We will not allow reality, facts, and truth to become optional. We will never surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
There it is. Just a masterful turn of phrase. Right up there with This is Sparta, Houston, we have a problem, One Night in Paris. As far as catchphrases with a geographic theme goes, this is right up there with the best of them. And quite honestly, I think this is going to be rocket fuel for a 2024 campaign. I think you may have heard it here first. This may be the first place that you're hearing any sort of speculation about whether or not this guy might be running for mayor of the United States in the next...
Now, Florida's success has been made more difficult by the floundering federal establishment in Washington, D.C. Federal government has gone on an inflationary spending binge that has left our nation weaker and our citizens poorer. It has enacted pandemic restrictions and mandates based more on ideology and politics than on sound science, and this has eroded freedom and stunted commerce. It has recklessly facilitated open borders, making a mockery of the rule of law, allowing massive amounts of narcotics to infect our states, importing criminal aliens, and greenlighting the flow of millions of illegal aliens into our country, burdening communities and taxpayers throughout the land.
Which is exactly why it's such a good thing that I am the governor of Florida right now, because of all that shit happening elsewhere. But seriously though, dude, we get it. You're running for president. Let's keep it moving. Come on.
It has imposed an energy policy that has crippled our nation's domestic production, causing energy to cost more for our citizens and eroding our nation's energy security and, in the process, our national security. It wields its authority through a sprawling, unaccountable, and out-of-touch bureaucracy that does not act on behalf of us, but instead looms over us and imposes its will upon us.
Here's the fucked up part about the state thing that we were talking about earlier that I've totally forgot to even mention. So like, you've still got all your states, right? Like the ones we talked about, but then even some other ones. Like, I don't even think I said anything about Alabama, but that's in the mix too. And so they're all doing their own things, right? Florida, obviously. But then they also kind of got to work together a little bit. And so to facilitate that, there's this like kind of state above a state, if you can even imagine such a thing. And that's called the federal government. And the federal government has the authority to regulate the way that the states interact with each other, and even some of the basic shit that they do within their own borders, like how it treats its citizens, shit like that. It's fucking whack.
The results of this have been predictably dismal. This has caused many to be pessimistic about the country's future. Some even say that failure is inevitable. Florida is proof positive that we, the people, are not destined for failure.
We, the people, that phrase is catnip to morons. They love it. It's the best. It's the best.
Decline is a choice. Success is attainable, and freedom is worth fighting for.
There's that word that we've been looking for. What kind of freedom? What kind of freedoms have we been talking about? Well, we've been talking about freedoms from those kind of ideologies that may have the staying power of like a hula hoop or a pet rock or like a Trump vodka or something like that. Just a fad like that. We want freedom from black people voting, or at least people who have been to prison. People who have been to prison for some sort of infraction that for which they've paid a debt to society, and now they're trying to be repatriated. We need freedom from them voting, because that they might have a slightly different class alignment than I do. So I would prefer that they don't vote so much. Freedom from my kids going to school with people that threaten my very fragile sense of sexuality. I'd like freedom from that. Oh, and of course, you know, the big one, freedom from masks and vaccines. These things that otherwise you might be put to death for not indulging in any of these other failed states that surround us, like perhaps Alabama.
Now, fighting for freedom is not always easy because the threats to freedom are more complex and more widespread than they have been in the past. The threats can come from entrenched bureaucrats in D.C., jet setters in Davos, and corporations wielding public power. But fight we must.
Whoa. Did he just say something about there being corporations operating in what should be the public sphere? Like, should we be nationalizing these companies, dude? Is that what we're talking about? Is that where we're going with this?
We embrace our founding creed that our rights are not granted by the courtesy of the state, but are endowed by the hand of the Almighty. We reject the idea that self-government can be subcontracted out to technocratic elites who reduce human beings to mere data points. We insist on the restoration of time-tested constitutional principles so that government of, by, and for the people shall not perish from this earth.
Okay, so we've got all these rights, and they're given to us by the man upstairs, right? And the government is here to guarantee those rights. We've got what's called a social contract. But what's been going on is that the government has been subcontracting those rights and their protection out to these corporations. But they just treat us like ones and zeros, right? They just reduce us to numbers. So what we've got to do so that these rights, that they don't perish from the whole face of the earth, that they're just not gone forever, what we've got to do is we've got to elect Ron DeSantis again. Ugh, we already did that. Fuck.
Florida has led the way in preserving what the father of our country called the sacred fire of liberty. It is the fire that burned in Independence Hall when 56 men pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish a new nation conceived in liberty. It's the fire that burned at a cemetery in Gettysburg when the nation's first Republican president pledged to this nation a new birth of freedom. It's the fire that burned among the boys who stormed the beaches of Normandy to liberate a continent and to preserve freedom for the world. It's the fire that infused the young preacher's dream, relayed at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, that the Declaration of Independence said what it meant and meant what it said. All men are created equal.
It's the fire that burns in the Proud Boy, screaming at the drag queen story hour. Like, get the fuck out of here. Fuck you.
It is the fire that led a resolute president to stand in Berlin and declare, "Tear down this wall," staring down the communists and winning the Cold War.
Well, I don't know why we're talking about communism now, honestly.
It is our responsibility here in Florida to carry this torch.
I'm so sick of this fucking torch, honestly. Honestly, I am.
We do not run from this responsibility. We welcome it. We will be on our guard. We will stand firm in the faith. We will be courageous. We will be strong.
So I guess we're in charge of this fucking torch now, like keeping it from perishing from the face of the earth. I don't know, like, how's this gonna work? Do we each get it, like, for one day out of the year? There's way too many people in the state for that. I don't know how that's... I'm not just being dense, either. I have practical concerns about this.
and we thank God and are proud to be citizens of the great free state of Florida. Thank you. God bless you. God bless this state and everybody throughout the land.
And everybody throughout the land. That's a delightfully fanciful way of ending that dog shit speech. That was terrible, guys. Come on, let's be honest. I think I really kind of drew blood, I think, from DeSantis. I think I really, sort of bodied him quite a bit. I think he's definitely met his match with me. He knows that. He'll know that. He's going to find out. He'll see this. He'll definitely see this. And he's going to know that he's toast. This is going to take him down in 2024. He'll never win the Republican National Convention, right? Yeah. Anyway, I hope that this has been as tedious for you to watch as it's been for me to make. If so, what are you supposed to do? Hit a button? Also, I'm trying to lose weight this year and get in shape. And hopefully by New Year's Eve, I'd like to be up to my, down to my fighting weight and back in good shape, and having trained back in jiu-jitsu and some Muay Thai to the point that I can realistically challenge Matt Gaetz to a no-holds-barred MMA match. That's what I'm looking forward to getting done this year. That's sort of my, that's my,